The New York Mets have a brand new manager in Carlos Mendoza, and we wanted to talk to our New York Post columnist, John Heyman. John, how you doing, man?
I'm good. How are you, Ryan?
I'm doing well. What a busy day today here in baseball world. We had seen so many managerial openings and how the cards were going to play around the shuffle. And it got a little chaotic here this afternoon today. So, John, we want to talk to you about how this all came about, specifically with the New York Mets. We heard rumors all offseason about Craig Counsell after David Stearns took the job with the New York Mets that he might bring his guy, Craig Counsell, over to be the manager. But you had spoken so many times with me about Craig Counsell and what's going to happen with him. He wants to get paid. So, John, what ultimately led to the decision here for the Mets to go with Carlos Mendoza as their manager?
Well, I just don't think the Mets were going to go there in terms of the money, and obviously worked out perfectly for Counsell. He got the big contract at $40 million over 5 years, $8 million a year, a record salary for a manager, and he gets to stay close to home. Being in Chicago on the north side, he's only 90 miles away from his home in Whitefish Bay, Wisconsin. So he gets everything that he wanted. Ultimately, the Mets were never going to go there anyway. I'd heard early on they weren't going to give a Torre like contract. Torre did get up to about $7.5 million a year, pretty close to this $8 million a year that Counsell got. So they weren't going to go there anyway, but they really never had that opportunity because Counsell decided, you know what, I want to go to the Cubs. He wanted to get the salary to reset the salary structure for major league managers that we knew. And he did that, and he stayed fairly close to home, 90 miles. He certainly can commute if he wants to.
Yeah, it was really interesting to see how this series of events played out, right? We saw the Guardians announce Stephen Vogt is going to be their new manager. And then we see the Mets hire Carlos Mendoza. And then we see Craig Counsell. Everyone assumed, oh, he's going to go back to Milwaukee, right? No, turns out he's actually going to be a Chicago Cub now, and Stephen Ross is now out of a job. So when you talk about Mendoza as a candidate here for the Mets, what is he going to bring to the Mets as a former Yankees bench coach? Now he gets to stay in New York, but now he's the top guy in New York as the Mets manager.
Right. I mean, the Counsell decision set everything in motion. Obviously, the Mets needed to pivot. The Guardians needed to pivot. The Brewers now will need to pivot. Mendoza was the bench coach for the Yankees, obviously interviews well. He was a candidate in San Diego, candidate in Cleveland. He very well thought of around baseball. People say nice things. To me, my position on it is that he's unproven. I think this is a tough job for someone who's unproven. Davey Johnson obviously did it for the Mets. They'd been their AAA manager, came up and did a great job, obviously, as the major league manager. Other than that, their first-time managers have just not panned out. It's a difficult job being the second team for the most part in a huge city. And, it's a team that's got a reputation for, some people would say jinxed, but it is a very difficult job. And, that's why I thought they needed to get somebody with experience, if not Counsell. I can see why they didn't outbid the $40 million, particularly. They probably would have to go way higher than that to really have a chance. But Counsell ultimately picked where he wanted to go. So he kind of took it out of their hands. I would have still looked for experience. Without experience, though, I had some other thoughts in mind of guys I thought a little bit more experienced, guys who are a little more out there that we know a little bit more about. Joe Espada from Houston, Mark DeRosa, who I work with at MLB Network. I would even like to see David Wright. I don't know if he wants to do the job, but it certainly would have been an interesting hire and got great publicity at the start. Here they're hiring a guy who's a Yankee. The Yankee team had a disaster by the account of their own general manager, Brian Cashman. Weren't much better than the Mets and weren't, frankly, that great strategically. So obviously interviews well thought of. To me, it's a projection. Good luck. Maybe it'll work out, but the history is not on his side.
History is not on his side. You make a great point about as a first-time manager here, John. Real quick, just to sum this all up, and in what we talked about, Buck Showalter was obviously let go. He had a year left on his deal. This feels like maybe, and I just want to ask you this: does this feel like this maybe have not been the right move because they didn't get their guy in Counsell and now they go to Mendoza? Instead, they had a guy in Buck Showalter who's experienced, has won a lot of games in New York, and can handle the media well, and knows the roster top to bottom. It feels like maybe this wasn't the direction that the Mets were hoping to go with their manager search, right?
Well, I obviously knew that if he wasn't going to get Counsell, he probably knew there was no guarantee that he would get Counsell. He knows he is from the Midwest. He wanted to move on from Buck Showalter. He didn't know Buck Showalter, but certainly knew of him, and he wants to grow with a guy. I can't blame him necessarily for that. It is the last line of my column in the Post for tomorrow. Why not just stick with Buck Showalter if this
Right.
is the results? He wasn't going to do that, obviously, and I kind of get that. I mean, he's want to get his own guy in there. Now this is his own guy, and it's probably a guy who's more like-minded, maybe a little more analytical. We shall see.
John, we appreciate you as always. I know you're really busy at the GM meetings, and I know it's going to be a busy week here for us, and appreciate you as always, man.
All right, thanks. Appreciate it.